The river's gentle murmur almost drowned out the soft crying, but Owen Tucker's ears, trained by years on the frontier, caught the sound instantly. He pulled back on his horse's reins, scanning the rocky riverbank in the fading Montana twilight of 1878. What he found changed everything. A girl, no. A young woman lay curled beside the rushing waters of the Jefferson River, her thin body shivering despite the relatively mild May evening. Her dress, once perhaps a fine calico, was now tattered and mud-stained. Dark hair spilled across her face and she clutched a small bundle to her chest. Owen dismounted carefully, his boots crunching on the gravel. He was returning from Helena after selling cattle, a 3-day ride he'd made countless times in his 30 years. Never had he encountered anything like this. "Miss," he called softly. "Miss, are you all right?" She startled violently, scrambling backward until her shoulders hit a boulder. The bundle in her arms moved, and Owen realized with a shock that it was a baby tiny and red-faced, wrapped in what looked like pieces of a petticoat. "Don't come any closer," she warned, her voice surprisingly steady despite her obvious exhaustion. "I have nothing worth taking." Owen raised his hands slowly. "I'm not looking to take anything, miss. Name's Owen Tucker. I have a ranch about 4 miles upriver. You and that little one shouldn't be out here with night coming on." The young woman's eyes darted around, as if looking for escape. She couldn't have been more than 19 or 20, Owen guessed, though weariness aged her face. "Where are you headed?" he asked gently. "Nowhere that concerns you," she replied, but her voice wavered. The baby began to fuss, and she rocked it automatically. Owen kept his distance, crouching down to appear less threatening. "That little one sounds hungry, and you look like you could use a hot meal yourself." He gestured to the western horizon, where the sun was slipping behind the mountains. "It'll be dark soon. Wolves come down to the river at night." Fear flickered across her face, not of him, he realized, but of spending another night exposed to the elements and predators with an infant to protect. "I have a cabin," Owen continued. "Warm, dry food. You can rest there tonight, and tomorrow I'll take you wherever you're headed." The baby's cries grew more insistent. The young woman looked down at the infant, then back at Owen, desperation warring with distrust in her eyes. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked. "You don't," Owen admitted, "but I swear on my mother's grave I mean you no harm." "Just offering shelter to someone who needs it." He paused. "My sister would haunt me forever if I left a woman and baby out here alone." Something in his tone must have convinced her, because after a long moment she gave a slight nod. When she tried to stand, however, her legs buckled beneath her. Owen moved forward instinctively, but stopped when she flinched. "May I help you up to my horse? It's not far, but you look too tired to walk." After another hesitation, she nodded again. Owen approached slowly and with more gentleness than his weathered hands seemed capable of, helped her to her feet. She swayed dangerously, clutching the baby to her chest. "I'm going to lift you both up now," he warned, before carefully gathering her in his arms. She was alarmingly light, as if she hadn't eaten properly in days. The baby continued to cry, a thin, desperate sound that tugged at something deep in Owen's chest. He settled her on his horse, then mounted behind her, keeping a respectful distance while still ensuring she wouldn't fall. "Hold on to the saddle horn," he instructed, and clicked his tongue to urge the horse forward. As they rode in silence, the young woman gradually relaxed against him, her exhaustion apparently overcoming her fear. "What's your name?" Owen asked quietly. There was a long pause before she answered. Lillian Gardner." "And the little one?" "Emma," Lillian whispered, adjusting the bundle in her arms. "She's 3 weeks old." Owen felt a surge of protective anger. What circumstances had forced this young mother and newborn to be alone by a river miles from any town? "Where's her father?" he asked, then immediately regretted it when he felt Lillian stiffen. "Dead," she said flatly. "Consumption. 2 months ago." "I'm sorry," Owen said, and meant it. They crested a small rise, and Owen's cabin came into view. It was larger than most bachelor quarters in the territory, a proper 2-room cabin with a covered porch and a small attached stable. A thin wisp of smoke still rose from the chimney where he'd banked the fire before leaving that morning. "Home," Owen said simply. He helped Lillian dismount and carried her to the porch while she clung to Emma. Inside, embers glowed in the stone fireplace. Owen quickly added kindling and blew it to life, then lit a lamp. The cabin was neat and surprisingly comfortable. A large bed occupied one corner, covered with a colorful quilt. A table and 2 chairs stood in the center, and open shelves held dishes and supplies. A door led to what appeared to be a small second room. "Sit by the fire," Owen instructed, guiding Lillian to a rocking chair. "I'll make something to eat." Lillian sank into the chair gratefully, her attention focused on quieting the increasingly frantic baby. "She needs milk," she said, her voice cracking. I haven't been able to feed her properly, not for days." Owen nodded, understanding the situation better now. "I keep a milk cow. Give me a few minutes." He moved efficiently around the cabin, stoking the fire higher and putting a pot of water to boil. Then he stepped outside to the small barn adjacent to the cabin. When he returned, he carried a small pail of fresh milk. "It's not mother's milk, but it'll do in a pinch," he said, pouring some into a smaller pot to warm. "My sister had 6 children. Used to thin cow's milk with a bit of water and sugar for the babies when needed." Lillian watched him warily as he prepared the milk, but when he handed her a cup of the warm mixture, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. Owen busied himself making a simple supper of beans, salt pork, and biscuits left from morning, giving Lillian privacy as she managed to get the baby to drink from the cup, little by little. Emma's cries subsided to hiccuping whimpers, then ceased altogether as her tiny stomach filled. "When did you last eat?" Owen asked, placing a plate of food beside Lillian. She looked up, Emma now sleeping in her arms. "Yesterday morning, some berries." Owen frowned. "Eat, then you can take my bed. I'll sleep in the other room." Lillian shook her head. "I can't take your bed." "You can and you will," Owen said firmly. "You need proper rest. Both of you do." Too exhausted to argue further, Lillian ate quickly, her free hand trembling slightly. When she finished, Owen showed her to the bedroom where he pulled back the quilt. "There are clean shirts in that trunk if you want something different to sleep in," he said, turning to leave. "I'll be just through that door if you need anything." Lillian stood awkwardly by the bed, Emma asleep in her arms. "Mr. Tucker." "Owen," he corrected. "Owen, thank you." Not many men would help strangers like this. He nodded, suddenly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Get some rest, Miss Gardner." "Lillian," she replied softly. "Lillian," he echoed and left the room, closing the door behind him. In the smaller second room, which served as his workshop and storage space, Owen made a pallet on the floor. As he lay down, he found himself listening to the quiet sounds from the other room, Lillian's footsteps, the rustle of fabric, the soft murmur as she spoke to the baby. What had happened to her? Where was she going? Owen had seen plenty of hardship on the frontier, but something about Lillian Gardner's situation troubled him deeply. Tomorrow, he decided he would find out more. For now, he was just glad they were safe and warm in his cabin rather than huddled by the river. Dawn came early in the Montana spring, light streaming through the cabin's windows before 5 o'clock. Owen rose quietly, used to early mornings. He had slept poorly, his mind troubled by thoughts of his unexpected guests. Checking that the bedroom door was still closed, he stoked the fire and put coffee on to boil. The domestic tasks that normally filled his mornings, feeding the animals, checking fences, suddenly seemed more purposeful with others depending on him. He milked the cow first, setting aside a generous portion for Lillian and the baby before taking care of his other chores. When he returned to the cabin, the bedroom door was open and Lillian sat in the rocking chair, Emma cradled in one arm. She had changed into one of his shirts, far too large for her slight frame but cleaner than her dress, which she'd apparently washed and hung near the fire to dry. "Good morning," Owen said, setting down the milk pail. "Did you sleep?" Lillian nodded. "Better than I have in weeks." She looked different in the morning light, younger, with delicate features and eyes that weren't quite blue or green but somewhere in between. Her dark hair, now brushed, fell in waves past her shoulders. "I brought more milk," Owen said, moving to prepare it as he had the night before. "And I can make breakfast. You must be hungry." "You don't need to wait on us," Lillian protested. Owen shrugged. "Not much else to do. Besides, you're still recovering your strength." As he prepared breakfast flapjacks with the last of his maple syrup, Lillian fed Emma, who seemed much more content this morning. The baby's face had lost its pinched look, and she gazed up at her mother with dark, unfocused eyes. "She looks better," Owen observed, setting a plate in front of Lillian. "Yes," Lillian agreed, a small smile softening her face. "Thank you for everything." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Owen asked the question that had kept him awake. "Where were you headed when I found you?" Lillian's fork paused halfway to her mouth. She set it down carefully. "Silver Creek. I have an aunt there, my mother's sister, or at least I hope she's still there. I haven't seen her in years." "Silver Creek is nearly 40 miles west," Owen said, concerned. "You were planning to walk all that way, with a newborn?" Lillian's chin lifted defensively. "I had no choice. After my husband died, his brother took everything: our house, the store James owned, even my wedding ring. Said it was all rightfully his since James had no sons." Her voice hardened. "When he started talking about how he'd take care of me now that I was alone, I knew I had to leave. Then when Emma came—" "You ran," Owen finished for her. Lillian nodded. "We left Helena 2 days ago. I had a little money saved, but it was stolen the first night when I tried to sleep in a way station. After that, I just kept walking. I thought I could follow the river to Silver Creek." Owen's hands tightened around his coffee cup. The thought of this young widow and her infant exposed to all the dangers of the territory filled him with anger. "That brother-in-law, what's his name?" "Frank Dowling," Lillian said. "But please don't trouble yourself over him. I just want to get to my aunt's house safely." Owen nodded slowly. "Silver Creek is still a hard journey, especially with a baby. The stage runs through twice a week, but not for another 3 days. We've imposed enough," Lillian said quickly. "If you could just point us in the right direction." "Absolutely not," Owen interrupted. "You're not setting out on foot again. You'll stay here until the stage comes, and I'll see you safely onto it." Lillian looked like she wanted to argue but glanced down at Emma and seemed to reconsider. "That's very kind, but I have no way to repay you." "I'm not asking for payment," Owen said. "Just doing what any decent person would do." After breakfast, Owen showed Lillian around the small ranch, the vegetable garden he'd started, the chicken coop, the paddock where his 2 horses grazed. It was a modest spread compared to some, but it was entirely his, built with his own hands over the past 5 years. "It's lovely," Lillian said sincerely, watching as Owen scattered feed for the chickens. "How long have you lived here?" 5 years on my own," Owen replied. "Before that, I worked other men's ranches, saved every penny." He gestured toward the mountains visible in the distance. "Always wanted my own place, something that couldn't be taken away." Lillian nodded, understanding in her eyes. "James and I had that dream too, a place of our own children." Her voice trailed off and she looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "You still can have that," Owen said quietly. Lillian smiled sadly. "Perhaps, but for now I just need to get us somewhere safe." The next 3 days fell into a surprisingly comfortable routine. Owen tended to his ranch work while Lillian recovered her strength. She insisted on helping around the cabin, cooking meals and washing clothes. Emma thrived on the regular feedings, her cries becoming stronger, more demanding. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, talking. Owen learned that Lillian had grown up in St. Louis, the daughter of a bookkeeper. She'd met James Gardner when he came east to arrange shipments for his Montana store. They'd married quickly, and she'd followed him west just a year ago, full of dreams for their future. Owen found himself sharing stories he rarely told anyone about growing up in Pennsylvania, losing his parents to influenza when he was 15. following his older sister and her husband west in search of a new beginning. About working cattle drives and saving money and finally buying this land when he was 25. "Your sister?" Lillian asked on the third evening as they sat drinking coffee after dinner. "Is she nearby?" A shadow crossed Owen's face. "No, she and her family moved on to Oregon 3 years ago. Her husband had gold fever." He stared into his coffee cup. "We write, but I haven't seen her since." "You must miss her," Lillian said softly. Owen nodded. "It gets lonely out here sometimes," he admitted, then looked embarrassed at the confession. Lillian was silent for a moment. "I understand loneliness," she finally said. "Even when I was married, Helena was strange to me. I knew no one except James and his family." Their eyes met across the table, a moment of shared understanding that made Owen's heart beat faster. He looked away first, suddenly conscious of how comfortable he'd become with Lillian's presence in his home. "The stage comes tomorrow," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "I'll take you into town in the morning." "Yes," Lillian agreed, but she sounded uncertain. "I should prepare our things." That night, Owen lay awake in his makeshift bed, listening to the soft sounds from the next room. The thought of the cabin empty again without Lillian's quiet presence and Emma's newborn cries left him feeling hollow. In just 3 days, they had filled a space in his life he hadn't realized was empty. But Lillian had plans, family waiting for her. And Owen knew all too well how precious family connections were on the frontier. He had no right to wish she would stay. Morning came, gray and drizzling. They ate breakfast in near silence, the mood subdued. Lillian had washed and mended her dress as best she could, and she wore it now, looking far more respectable than when Owen had found her. Emma was wrapped in a soft blanket Owen had unearthed from a trunk one his sister had made years ago for a baby that never came. "The stage should arrive around noon," Owen said, clearing their plates. "We should leave soon to be sure we don't miss it." Lillian nodded, not meeting his eyes. "I've packed the extra milk as you suggested, and the bread. It should last until we reach Silver Creek." "Good," Owen said, his voice oddly formal. "I'll hitch up the wagon." Outside, the rain fell steadily, drumming on the cabin roof. Owen hitched his older horse to the small wagon he used for supplies, then returned to find Lillian standing by the door, Emma in her arms and a small bundle of belongings at her feet. "Ready?" he asked. Lillian nodded but didn't move. She stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "Yes." He prompted gently. "I just want to thank you again, what you did for us. I'll never forget it." Owen swallowed hard. It was nothing anyone else wouldn't have done. "But it wasn't anyone else," Lillian said quietly. "It was you. You found us. You saved us." Before Owen could respond, she moved past him to the wagon. He helped her up onto the seat, then placed her bundle in the back, covering it with an oilcloth to keep it dry. With a last look at his cabin, he climbed up beside her and set the wagon in motion. The journey to town took nearly 2 hours in the rain. They spoke little, each lost in their own thoughts. Emma slept peacefully, sheltered from the rain by a small canopy Owen had rigged over the wagon's seat. Riverton was barely a town, just a cluster of buildings around the stage stop, with a general store, a saloon, and a small hotel. When they arrived, Owen helped Lillian down from the wagon and carried her bundle into the stage office. The agent informed them that the stage was running late due to the rain but should arrive within the hour. "We can wait in the hotel lobby," Owen suggested, noticing Lillian shivering slightly in her damp dress. "It'll be warmer there." The hotel lobby was empty except for a sleepy clerk. Owen bought coffee for them both, and they sat in worn armchairs near a small stove. Emma woke and began to fuss, and Lillian rocked her gently, murmuring soothing words. Owen watched them, memorizing the sight Lillian's dark hair falling around her face as she bent over the baby, her slender hands cradling Emma with such care. In just a few short days, they had become precious to him in a way he couldn't articulate. "Lillian," he began, not sure what he was going to say, but knowing he needed to say something before she left. The door to the hotel burst open. letting in a gust of rain and a large man in an expensive coat. Owen's attention was drawn to the interruption, but when he heard Lillian's sharp intake of breath, he turned back to her. She had gone pale, her eyes wide with fear. "What is it?" he asked, alarmed. "It's him," she whispered. "Frank, my brother-in-law." Owen looked back at the newcomer, taking in his florid face and flashy watch chain. The man was scanning the lobby impatiently, but he hadn't noticed them yet in the corner. "How did he find you?" Owen asked urgently. "I don't know," Lillian said, her voice trembling. "But if he sees me, Owen, he can't take Emma. He can't." Without hesitation, Owen stood, positioning himself between Lillian and the door. "He won't," he promised. "Stay here." He approached Frank Dowling with deliberate casualness, noting the man's expensive clothes and the arrogant set of his mouth. This was a man used to getting his way. "Afternoon," Owen said pleasantly. Waiting for the stage 2, Dowling glanced at him dismissively. "Looking for someone." "A young woman with a baby, my brother's widow. She's unwell, ran off shortly after giving birth. The doctor says it's a female condition, affects the brain." He tapped his temple significantly. "I've been searching for weeks, heard she might be headed this way." Owen's jaw tightened at the lie, but he kept his expression neutral. "Haven't seen anyone like that, just got to town myself." Dowling looked past him, his gaze sweeping the lobby. Owen tensed, ready to intervene if necessary, but at that moment, Emma let out a wail. Dowling's head snapped toward the sound. "That's her," he said, moving toward Lillian. "Lillian, thank God I found you. Everyone's been so worried." Owen stepped into his path. "The lady doesn't seem happy to see you." Dowling's friendly facade slipped. "This is none of your concern, mister." "That's my brother's widow and child. They're my responsibility now." "They don't belong to you," Owen said, his voice dropping dangerously. "And the lady seems to prefer being on her own." Dowling's face darkened. "Get out of my way, Cowboy. That woman isn't right in the head." "And that baby is her child," Owen finished firmly, "and they're under my protection now." "Your protection?" Dowling sneered. "And who exactly are you?" Before Owen could answer, Lillian appeared at his side, Emma clutched tightly to her chest. "He's the man who saved us when you left us with nothing," she said, her voice stronger than Owen had ever heard it. "The man who showed me more kindness in 3 days than you did in a year." Dowling's face reddened. "You ungrateful," he reached for Lillian's arm, but Owen caught his wrist in a grip honed by years of breaking wild horses. "Touch her," Owen said quietly, "and it'll be the last thing you do." Something in Owen's eyes must have convinced Dowling he was serious, because the larger man stepped back, rubbing his wrist. "This isn't over," he warned. "That baby is a Gardner. She belongs with her father's family." "Her father would be ashamed of how you've treated his wife," Owen said. "Now I suggest you leave town on the next stage, or I'll explain to the sheriff how you drove a widow and newborn into the wilderness with nothing." Dowling looked from Owen to Lillian, calculating his options. Finally, he adjusted his coat with an attempt at dignity. "You haven't heard the last of this," he said, but the threat sounded hollow. With a final glare, he stormed out of the hotel. Lillian sagged against Owen, trembling. "He'll come back," she whispered. "He won't give up." Owen put his arm around her shoulders, steadying her. "We'll figure something out," he promised. "For now, let's get you somewhere safe." They retreated to a corner of the lobby, where Owen kept watch on the door while Lillian tended to Emma. Outside, the rain continued to fall, and they could hear the occasional rumble of thunder. "The stage will be even later in this weather," Owen said, returning from checking with the clerk. "But it should still come today." Lillian looked up at him, indecision clear in her eyes. "I don't know if I should still go to Silver Creek. What if Frank follows us there? What if my aunt isn't even there anymore?" Owen hesitated, then sat beside her. "Lillian, there's another option. You could come back to the ranch with me." She stared at him, surprise evident on her face. "Back to your cabin." "Yes," Owen said, gaining confidence as he spoke. "It's remote. Dowling wouldn't find you easily, and you'd be safe there while we figure out what to do next." "We," Lillian repeated softly. Owen met her gaze steadily. I care about what happens to you and Emma more than I probably should after just a few days." A faint blush colored Lillian's cheeks. "I feel the same," she admitted. "When I think about leaving." She trailed off, looking down at Emma. "But I can't impose on you indefinitely. You have your own life." "A lonely one," Owen said honestly. "Having you and Emma at the cabin these past days, it's the first time it's felt like a real home." Lillian's eyes widened at his words. Before she could respond, the hotel door opened again, and the stage agent hurried in, shaking rain from his hat. "Stage just sent word," he announced to the room at large. "Bridge is washed out 10 miles east. No stage today, folks, maybe not tomorrow either." Owen looked at Lillian, raising an eyebrow in question. She bit her lip, then nodded slightly. "Well," Owen said, standing and offering her his hand. "Looks like we're heading back to the ranch after all." The return journey was quieter than their trip into town, but the silence was different now, thoughtful rather than sad. The rain had eased to a gentle drizzle, and patches of blue sky appeared between clouds. "You think he's still in town?" Lillian asked as they neared the turnoff to Owen's property. "Probably," Owen said. "Men like that don't change their minds easily, but he won't find us out here. Not without help, and I doubt he'll get much of that. Folks around here don't take kindly to men who threaten women and babies." Lillian nodded, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "What will we do now? First," Owen said, "we get you and Emma settled again. Then I'll ride to Silver Creek in a day or two, find out if your aunt is still there. If she is, you can decide what you want to do. And if she isn't?" Lillian asked quietly. Owen glanced at her. "Then you have a place with me for as long as you want it." The cabin came into view, looking somehow more welcoming than when they'd left it that morning. Owen helped Lillian down from the wagon, then took Emma while Lillian stretched her cramped legs. "Welcome back," he said, handing the baby carefully back to her mother. Lillian looked up at the cabin, then at Owen. "It feels like coming home," she said softly. "Is that strange after such a short time?" Owen shook his head. "Not strange at all." That evening, after Emma was fed and sleeping in a makeshift cradle Owen had crafted from a wooden crate, they sat by the fire, planning their next steps. Owen would ride to Silver Creek as soon as the weather cleared. In the meantime, they would prepare for the possibility of Frank Dowling discovering their whereabouts. "I could build onto the cabin," Owen said, thinking aloud. "Add another room, maybe a proper nursery for Emma." Lillian looked at him curiously. "You do that?" Owen met her gaze. "I want you both to be comfortable here, however long you stay." "Owen," Lillian began hesitantly, "I need to ask you something. Why are you doing all this for us? The truth." Owen was silent for a long moment, watching the fire. "When I found you by the river," he finally said, "something changed. I've lived alone for so long, I'd forgotten what it was like to care for someone else, to be needed." He looked up at her. "These past few days with you and Emma, it's like finding something I didn't know I was missing." Lillian's eyes glistened in the firelight. "I feel it too," she whispered. "This connection between us, it's so fast, so unexpected, but it feels real," Owen finished for her. "Yes," Lillian smiled, a true smile that transformed her face. "It feels real." Owen reached across the space between them and took her hand. Her fingers twined with his, warm and trusting. "I know it's too soon," he said carefully. "You're still grieving James, still finding your way, but I want you to know that if you chose to stay, really stay, I would do everything in my power to make you and Emma happy." Lillian's grip tightened on his hand. "What are you saying, Owen?" "I'm saying that in just a few days, you've come to mean more to me than anyone has in years," Owen said simply. "I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you, Lillian Gardner. And I'm willing to wait, however long it takes, for you to be ready to hear that." Tears spilled down Lillian's cheeks, but she was smiling. "James was a good man," she said softly. "A good husband, but we married so quickly, moved west so suddenly. I cared for him deeply, but what I feel for you." She shook her head wonderingly. "It's different, stronger somehow." Owen's heart thundered in his chest. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I don't want to leave," Lillian interrupted. "Not to Silver Creek, not anywhere. I want to stay here with you." I want to see if this feeling between us is as real and lasting as I think it is. Owen moved to kneel beside her chair, still holding her hand. I can promise you this, Lillian. If you stay, you'll never have to sleep beside a river again. You'll never have to run or be afraid or wonder where your next meal is coming from. This cabin, this land, it can be your home, our home. Lillian touched his face gently. You carried us into your cabin that first night, she said. And somehow, along the way, you carried us into your heart as well. Owen smiled, joy spreading through him like warmth. And you into mine, he said softly, before leaning forward to kiss her for the first time. Outside, the last of the rain stopped, and the setting sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light through the cabin windows. In her makeshift cradle, Emma slept peacefully, safe and sound. And by the fire, two people who had been alone for too long found in each other the promise of a new beginning. 1 year later, Owen stood on the porch of a much-improved cabin, watching as Lillian hung laundry on the line, Emma toddling unsteadily around her feet. The past months had brought many changes: a proper wedding in the small church in Riverton, a new room added to the cabin, word that Frank Dowling had moved to California after gambling away what remained of his brother's store. But the greatest change was in Owen himself. The lonely rancher had become a husband, a father to Emma, and soon, a father again. Lillian's gentle rounding beneath her apron promised another child by winter. What are you smiling about? Lillian called, noticing his gaze. Owen walked down to help her with the laundry. Just thinking about the day I found you by the river, he said, lifting Emma into his arms. The little girl giggled, patting his face with small hands. Best detour I ever took. Lillian smiled, the happiness in her face a daily miracle to Owen. From sleeping beside a river to sleeping beside you, she said, leaning up to kiss his cheek. I'd say we've both come a long way. Owen wrapped his free arm around her waist, drawing her close. Above them, the Montana sky stretched endlessly blue, promising summer and harvest and years of tomorrows together. We sure have, he agreed, and we've got a long way still to go. Together, Lillian said, and it wasn't a question. Owen looked at his wife, at his daughter, at the home they had built and the life they were creating. Together, he affirmed, every step of the way.